Hey, hi everybody, I hope you're all having a good day. I hope you're all smiling and enjoying your lovely day. So in this vlogging tutorial, I'm going to be showing you guys and helping you guys navigate through Warudo's camera controls. And hopefully, this will help you at least get some awareness regarding all of this stuff, basically. Which is pretty simple, but I will do my best to, of course, navigate so you understand what the heck the purpose is and such. And hopefully, as I go on with these Warudo tutorials, hopefully I'll cover as much as I can with Warudo, so that way you guys can become Warudo masters. So basically, when it comes to Warudo, the benefit of Warudo is that they have a pretty crazy camera system. Of course, I will say, as of the current time of this video, Warudo is still working on their camera settings, since this, as of right now, is an open beta program. Eventually, there are going to be a non-beta program pretty soon, but as of right now, in the recording of this tutorial, this is an open beta version of Warudo, and there are going to be probably some features you may end up seeing that are added that may not be featured in this tutorial. I just want to say that for future cases, it might happen. Depending on how extreme the updates are, I might make an update tutorial on it, but we'll see what happens. But either way, basically, to start off, usually when you start off with Warudo, it should by default have the camera setting. If it does not have a camera by any chance, which it should by default, but if it doesn't, you're going to click on the plus button right here, and you're going to scroll all the way down to cinematography right here. And this is where you can be able to add a camera. You can also add other stuff as well, as you can see here, but I will get, of course, to everything else slowly but surely as I post more tutorials. But basically, that's how you'll be able to add a camera. You can actually be able to add as much cameras as possible, which I have mine here. I have multiple cameras here, basically. And, basically, when it comes to multiple cameras here, you can be able to toggle them and such. So, to start off, though, you'll have your camera here. You can be able to duplicate the asset, so you can have pretty much a duplicate of the camera, which is actually, you know, pretty good. So it's a good thing we can duplicate the camera. You can even rename the camera as well here by pressing the little pen button and just rename it to whoever you want. You can call this camera test if you wish, and then press on the OK button. So you can do that. If you want to delete a camera, you may, by deleting the camera, basically. So you could do that. But now let's get into the settings here. And this is pretty much all the settings we need. This is pretty simple, you know, but I'll show you each of them so you can be aware of what is possible. So basically, right here with the camera, basically you'll have enabled, and, you know, basically you can enable it or disable it. Now, the thing with enabling and disabling a camera, is that if you were to enable a camera, it will tend to utilize some of your GPU. However, sometimes it may not. It really depends on your PC. But just be aware that when it comes to enabling and disabling a camera, it might utilize some GPU stuff. So if there's like a camera that you are working on and you don't wish for it to be used, like let's say I have all these other cameras here, right? And I'm only going to be really using one. These are just test cameras or something like that. You might want to keep it disabled, or, you know, press the no button. And what it'll do is that it will freeze your camera, basically. Which I guess to a certain degree, though, this can also be used if you want to have like a freeze pose or something. Not sure. But you could definitely do that, I guess. But either way, pretty much though, it will basically just freeze the camera. You can't do any edits with it since it's off. It's better to have the camera set to enabled though, but if by any chance you need it disabled, especially if you're going to set up as a toggle, which you could do via blueprints, which for this tutorial I will not go over blueprints. I'll just only keep it nice and simple, because blueprints can get a bit tedious. But basically here, you can do that. You can do transform. You can set up specific values here if you want. That's a good thing about Warudo, is that if you really want exact specific values, you can definitely put it here, whether scale, rotation, or position. Primarily for cameras, I would stick with rotation or position. I would not touch this if I were you. I mean, unless you want to, but again, you don't have to. But besides that, though, there is also control mode. Control mode is definitely pretty nice. Control mode, if you set it to none, it will basically have it where your mouse won't affect the camera. However, if you set it to free look, you can use your WASD keys to move around your scene basically, and use your right click to rotate around. You can also use, if in perspective mode, you can use the middle scroll wheel to move. Right now mine is set to orthographic, and that's pretty much the main controls you have to worry about. But pretty much you can utilize WASD to move the character around basically. Pretty neat. The other one is, of course, orbit character, basically, which orbit character is basically where you can rotate around the character, basically, like this. Which is pretty nice if you don't want to, like, move around, which you could use your middle mouse to, like, you know, pan it, basically. But if you don't want to do any crazy movements and you want your controls to be only on the mouse rather than the keyboard, basically, you could definitely utilize this, and it's pretty nice, though. If you prefer that control. Otherwise, you can set it to none and just leave it the way it is. But I'll go ahead and set it to free look in case I have to do any movements, which I'll correct here. And again, you can always correct it here if you so desire. So I can set this to like 360, 180, set this to 0. And then I can also click and drag here to fine adjust it basically. Set this to 0.5. 1.5. Boom. Now besides that though, you can also do the control sensitivity as well. Control sensitivity controls how fast and how slow everything moves. So I'll set this to orbit character. And let's say we're going to set it to be very high. So basically it'll make it where the controls move a lot more faster basically. However, if you set it to a lower number, it will move a lot more slower. It's definitely nice to mess around with the settings to kind of fine-tune. If you prefer something more faster, you may. Otherwise, if you don't want something faster, you might want to put it lower, basically. If you set it to 0, nothing's going to move at all, basically. So it's pretty nice. Pretty nice indeed. Now, besides that, though, you can also set it to focus character. You can have it where it doesn't focus on the character, though. This is pretty nice, especially if you have full body tracking and you're moving around a heck ton. This can definitely be useful if you're doing that sort of control. So there's that. You can set it to character or not, whichever one. And you can even reset camera transform if you want to reset it. Now, besides that, though, there is, of course, the output here. We'll talk about this. So there is the spout output. So if you want a single camera to have a very specific spout output, you can click on yes and it'll have its own spout output. If you prefer NDI for certain reasons, there's also NDI support here. If you want virtual camera support for Discord or Zoom calls, you can definitely also say yes to this, and even mirror or non-mirror it basically. Pretty cool. So you can set it to however you want. Each, pretty much, I think there's a max of 8 cameras you can have per output, basically. Especially for virtual cam, there's 8 different Warudo outputs, basically. But pretty much, besides that, you can set up a pretty hefty amount, which is pretty nice, though. Especially if you want specific control on the output, basically. But besides that, though, you can also take a screenshot if you wish. Just click the button, and then you can open your screenshot folder so you can grab the picture, and you can use it on thumbnails or your Twitter pictures, whichever you want. Now, the other thing I will mention, though, about this, please keep in mind, if I were to set all of my cameras to have the spout output, basically, all of these, this will use a lot of your GPU. Same thing with NDI and virtual camera. If all of these are set to have their own output, it will utilize your GPU too much. How do you fix it? Well, thankfully, with a new update on Warudo, you can actually set up a global output for all of these, rather than having each one have their own individual output. So, we're going to click on this little rocket ship here, and we're going to click on the settings button here. We're going to click on core here, and then right here, this is where there's the core settings. You can set of course, the window height and width, FPS, and all that other cool stuff, basically, for extra fine-tuning. But here, there is an output, basically. You can set it to have the output, spout output here. You can also set it to have NDI and virtual camera as well as the general. So basically whatever happens on your screen, you can set up here. But again, the only benefit of having specific controls here is if, let's say, I guess, let's say, I guess you're streaming, for example, you're streaming your avatar, right? And your avatar has to be, let's say, in this corner here, right? However, for, let's say you're doing a collab, right? You need the character to be in the front for your friend to capture your avatar instead. That would be the best benefit of using this output part here, rather than the global. I would still recommend have the global, though, if by any chance. However, for collabs, that would definitely be quite useful instead, especially with a virtual camera output. So there's that benefit right there, basically. So keep that in mind. Now, besides that, though, there is, of course, the basic properties. You can set it where basically you have a transparent background, so if you want something transparent here, which is definitely recommended if you're going to capture your character. If you prefer transparent background for your own setup, I would recommend it. If by any chance you prefer a chroma key by any reason, you could definitely set up a chroma key if necessary. It really depends, but I would prefer transparent background if possible. The other thing beneficial about Warudo is also the fact there's orthographic support. So you can set it to have no orthographic projection, or you can have it set to projection, which I will go ahead real quickly and swap over to here so you can actually see it. So basically, you can have it set to none, so that way it's set to perspective, or you can set it to be orthographic mode and adjust the field of view here to change the zooming of the field of view. Now you may be wondering, what's the difference between orthographic projection and perspective? Well, orthographic is definitely pretty nice if you're trying to go for an extremely flat look. So for my avatar, since I'm trying to look, I guess, more toon style, the orthographic helps sort of enhance it. But do keep in mind, orthographic is very awful when you're having environments. So if you're going to have heavy environments around your avatar and such, I would not recommend orthographic mode. And in fact, I would recommend have projection mode set up, but just make sure that your field of view is set to sort of like a semi-low number. And then you basically just zoom out, basically, pretty much, with your free look, like up here, basically. So you can set this to free look, and then you can zoom out, basically. So you'll still have that sort of flat look, but your environments will still look pretty good. Just basically use it depending on how you feel is best for your setup, basically. But primarily I set it to orthographic projection, but I'll leave it as perspective for now. Handheld movement. Handheld is basically where if you want to feel that someone is holding the camera, this is pretty nice. Not really recommended for streaming, but this could be nice for, like, let's say just chatting streams. So, like, I mean stream as in if you're gaming and something like that, you don't want your character shaking all over the place. But if you're doing something like, I guess it just depends, really. If you're doing like a talk stream or you're chatting, like you're making a video, chatting with people or saying some announcement or something, it really just depends on what you're doing, honestly. I'm just kind of giving some recommendation, but it's up to you on what you prefer. You can press on the yes, and it'll have like a sort of handheld movement, similar to what Shoost has with their camera movement thing. You can set the intensity to be very high, and you can also set the speed to be very fast. So if you want something like a very shaky look, you can set it to be like that. Or you can set it to be very low to have a more gradual and slow movement, basically. I primarily have this off, but there may be some cases, like some videos I might want to have this on. So there's that. The tone mapping and color grading is basically sort of like a filter for your avatar, basically. I will say, though, there may be some times this may not work for your avatar. I would recommend please make sure you mess with your light settings if possible, and try to adjust this, see if you can get it working, and maybe play with your post-processing effects if by any chance this isn't working. Otherwise, please report to the developer if by any chance you are struggling on setting up your LUT texture, basically. There are a big number, there's a lot of filters you can have, there's different styles and such. It'll definitely take a while for you to, figure out which one is the best for you. But there is a lot of variety, and definitely pretty nice, though, if you're looking for a nice little filter, basically. Let's say, for example, I want the red-purple sort of setup here, basically. I can set the intensity to be either to its max, or it could be sort of semi, so it can add a little bit of a filter to it, but not so much. This isn't necessary to have on your avatar, but if you want that sort of nice touch, depending on which is best for you, you might want that. You can even have it to be set to red if you wish, whichever one. You can even set up Ace's tone mapping, which I'm not a fan of, but if you want it, you can set that up, depending on what you like. There's also vibrance, contrast, and brightness as well, which is pretty nice to mess with if you need some more further fine-tuning, basically, which is pretty epic. So, yeah, you can mess with that. There's even tint as well that you can set up. So if you want to set up like different colors and stuff, it's kind of like the LUT texture, but you can have like a single color do the work for you. You can definitely set that up, basically. And even, of course, set the alpha of it, basically, for finer control. And also, by the way, if you need to reset by any chance, there is this tiny little button here to reset the settings if you so wish, or if necessary. So I can go ahead and reset these values, pretty much, so that helps. And with that being said, though, that's pretty much what the tone mapping is. It's pretty cool if you know, depending on how you use it, but do what's best for you. Now, bloom is basically something I always tend to use. It's basically to give that sort of glow look to your avatar. The more intense it is, the more glowy it gets. However, you can also mess with the threshold to make it easier to glow or less. Or you can make the threshold as in, like, you know, basically, it can get much more slower when it comes to the bloom, basically. So you could do that, basically. It helps a lot. But you set it to however you want. I don't recommend having it too bright like this, basically. Make sure you keep an eye out for your viewers' eyes. Don't hurt their eyes. And make sure to also, you know, if you want, you can set up like a sort of tint with your bloom. So if you want the bloom to be a bit of a different color slightly, you can have it be set to blue, like this. So it's pretty nice, and of course utilize alpha, which I'll go ahead and set that to white. You can also set up the depth here. This is basically where the farther your, it's basically where the farther you are from your character, it will reduce the bloom effect, basically, because you don't want your character to be super glowy when far away. So definitely mess with this depending on how far you usually go. Usually this isn't, you know, you can just leave it alone. But if you have moments where your character is going to be very far away, you can set this to be 0. You can also even set up, you know, reducing the bloom when it's near the camera, if you wish. Setting up to different values if you want. Otherwise, this you can just leave this at 0, but that's up to you if you want to fine-tune it. You can also set it to higher quality, or if you're a potato PC, you can set it to a much lower quality. Or maybe style preferences, you may prefer lower quality. Ambient occlusion, you can set it to be enabled, which I don't recommend for anime-style models. It's more recommended for realistic models, but this could also work with anime models if you know what you're doing, but kind of depends. So mess around with the settings to see if you like it. Otherwise, I usually don't recommend it for anime-style models. But basically, though, you can set up the intensity and such to be however you want. Even set up a color to be different and such. So, you know, pretty nice. You can even set it to be lower quality or higher quality. But I'll go ahead and set this to disabled. There's also anamorphic layer flares here. You can basically set it up so that way it gives like it's like an addition to your bloom, basically, but it has that sort of like flare to it, as you can see with my eyes. So it looks something like this, basically. But of course, if you want to have it, you may mess around with the settings here. Otherwise, if you don't want it, you can always disable it. You can even set the tint, of course, just like bloom, where if you want it to be blue and such, you can do that. Pretty nice effect. Wow. And you can even set vertical layers as well. So if you want it to be vertical, you can. Otherwise, you can have it set to horizontal. And you can set it to be lower quality or higher quality, depending on what your style is. And I'll go ahead and disable that. Depth of field. This is definitely really nice if you have environments, basically. So if you have like a background area on your character, the depth of field can make it where the background is slightly blurry, but your character is in focus. So you can have it set to where it doesn't focus on the character, or it can focus on the character. You can have focusing speed depending on how the camera moves, or you can have focal length, depending on, like, you know, how far you want the focus to affect. And of course, you know, affecting the distance too as well, right here. You can also set it to have bokeh effect as well if you wish. Usually, you know, it's fine if you want. Like, I'll show you if I put this here. This sort of like brightness is like a sort of a bokeh effect. but you can also reduce it if it's too much. So we'll just have focus character. And basically you can set the threshold if you want, depending on what you want. And of course, high quality or low quality. I'll make sure to have this disabled though. But again, if you prefer it, you can. Chromatic aberration is basically a type of it's like sort of that pinkish greenish sort of like outline. It's like it's like that sort of like effect basically. It's pretty nice for certain effects basically, I guess. Pretty much looks like this. So if you want something like that, you may. My old model actually used to have something like this. I don't use that anymore, but you can have that. You can even set the smoothing to be, a small, a big amount or a small amount. So whichever you like. It's a pretty small difference though. Lens dirt is basically where, if, depending on the environment, you may want to have sort of like this sort of lens dirt look to it basically. There are 5 different presets, which is pretty nice, depending on if you want it. I don't use it, but maybe for some certain environments, you may want to use it, which really depends, basically. So, yeah. Besides that, though, there is also Vignette, where if you want sort of the outer border of your screen to have, sort of a darkness, you can. I usually have this set up in OBS already, but if you want it in Warudo, you may, which is pretty nice. You can also have it to fade out, so it's either close in or more outer, basically. And you can even have it where the blinking's like this, so you can kind of achieve that nice, fun eye look, basically. Woo! Oh my god, Akana. But I'll go ahead and disable this. There's night vision as well, which gives you a binary look to your avatar, basically. It's pretty nice, though, depending on how you like it. It can give, a nice cool vibe basically, but if you don't like it, you can always disable it, but if you want it, there's that. There's also a blur effect as well, which the difference between depth of field is that depth of field affects the you can have it where it affects the environment only and focus on your characters. This one can be pretty nice if you're trying to do, let's say, an avatar reveal, for instance, where you're debuting an avatar and you're trying to blur the features of the avatar and everything else. There's that. They kind of do pretty much similar things, but, one's more simpler, the other one's a little, has more settings. There's also pixelate as well, where if you want to have your character pixelated, you may. You can set it to a high value. Don't set it too high, though, as it will just not work. Usually I would recommend about, this much, basically, and you can set it to a lower number. So, yeah. Pretty much you can say how much pixely you look, basically, which gives a really nice effect, though. Especially depending on some games, maybe you may want to have that sort of pixely look to it. But I'll go ahead and disable that. As for advanced is basically where if your camera is super far away or close to your avatar, basically this will adjust how much your post-processing effects will clip onto your character or environment and such. So if you want to play with that, you may. Usually the default settings are quite fine, but if you want to change it up, you may. Now, as for avatar or the camera toggles, basically what you saw me did earlier here, I am pressing on the tab key to basically change my my camera viewing here, basically. Now, of course, you can definitely set up camera toggles using the blueprints, but in this tutorial, I will not be covering the blueprint stuff as, it can get quite complicated, basically, here. But I'll make sure I cover it, especially because I haven't even set up my camera bindings as of right now. Eventually, as I learn more about the blueprints myself, I'll definitely make sure to let you guys know and teach you guys about it. But either way, if you know anything about nodes, you can check it out. There is the Warudo documentation in the description. You could definitely check it out and maybe get a head start on getting yourself set up with key bindings, whether with your Stream Deck, whether hotkeys, whichever you want, basically. Because yes, Warudo does have Stream Deck support, which is really nice. They even have their own plugin for that, so you could definitely check it out. But besides that, though, pretty much in a nutshell, hopefully pretty much that should go over everything regarding the camera stuff. And yeah, pretty much now you are a master at Warudo cameras. And hopefully, as I make more tutorials, I will definitely cover more about the other stuff that you can do with Warudo, such as environments, tracking, all the other good stuff, basically. But I definitely look forward to, hearing what you guys have to say about Warudo. Do you like Warudo? Do you want particular settings? And, oh, by the way, if by any chance you want to request features, I actually should say this, if by any chance you want to request any features to the developer, please join their Discord server. They are really active, very active indeed. They are willing to, they're currently taking in any sort of feedback, whether debug, bug reports, or even request features, like if you want leap motion support, which that is going to be in the works, there you could do that. Technically also, you can even say you want URP support for Warudo. I think there's actually a sort of version, I think, for that. You might have to talk with the developer on that, though. But basically, though, if there is a particular feature that you are curious about or that you want in Warudo, definitely let the developer know, so that way they can make, the developer can be able to make Warudo, an amazing program, because it's currently an open beta. Anyone can get it. So definitely check out the Discord, the documentation, and this, their download in Steam. So yeah, but definitely let me know if you have any other questions regarding the camera stuff, or if you have any struggles with Warudo. But I do ask, please don't ask me about the blueprints. I actually really don't have the brains quite yet on understanding nodes quite now for Warudo, because it is different from Vignette. It's actually a little bit more complicated. As I learn more about nodes, I'll definitely let you guys know, but for now, I can only keep, for me, if you're asking me, I can only keep very limited, questions and answers. I would recommend better to go to the Discord server. Please contact the developer, as it is just a much better choice. They know their program. They can help you out understanding the nodes. They'll even help you out setting up your nodes as well, so you can be able to use Warudo. But either way, though, I'll leave my socials here below, and I hope you guys have a lovely day. Heika, 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 saying goodbye, everyone. I hope to see you guys next time, okay? Bye-bye!